Bourgogne. We will visit what we call the espace scénographique. It's not a museum really, it's more interactive, and we try to give the information, the clue to understand a little bit better Burgundy, because as you know it's not always very easy. So usually the people we meet here, you can read through words being said or written by winegrowers or wine professionals, just to give you an idea about the philosophy of Burgundy wine. And so we go in. You will see it's quite dark at the beginning, but it's a very relaxing atmosphere. And one panel. When we arrive in this first place, the first thing we do, we discovered the map of the family of Burgundy. As you know, when we talk about Burgundy wine, we don't talk about just one region. Burgundy is a quite large region, but the vineyard is split between different regions. There's the Côte de Nuit, some of Dijon, the Saint-Georges, the Côte de Beaune near Beaune, the Côte Chalonnaise, the Mâconnais, Chablis and l'Auxerrois, which is in fact northwest between Dijon and Paris, a little bit of the Châtillonnais, and the limit of the Champagne area. And that's the place where we can make quite a nice Crémant Bourgogne. We cannot call it Champagne, even if it's made the same way, with the same grape, but the Champagne people are very touchy, so. We call it Crémant de Bourgogne. Right, so we start 200 million of years ago, okay? So we have to go back a little bit to imagine that most of the area here, most of the France was covered by the sea, and it will last quite a long time, more than 50 million of years. During this period, we start about 195, 200 million of years ago. During this period, the sea level changed permanently. Sometimes the sea was deeper than another period. But when the sea is very deep, you get sediment coming from the rivers in the continent, or at the bottom of the sea, and usually those sediment will be later on transformed into clay, you see. But when the sea is very shallow, you have lots of life and lots of fishes, crabs and shells, and all those, when they die, of course, all those shells and all those bones will be compact and transformed slowly into limestone. So limestone is really the key here to understand Burgundy wine. Limestone is everywhere. But when the sea is not too deep and is deep enough to have no more, I will say, the shells or whatever, you will have marls. Marls is a mix between clay and limestone. They are clay rich in limestone. We call them marl. And it's those marls you find lots of little fossils, or sometimes little shells. You probably know Chablis. You will know that in Chablis we have specific marls, we call them Chimérégian marls. Those Chimérégian marls, in it, you find tiny oysters, about 5 millimeters big, very tiny. We call them Exogyra virgula. Okay? Marls, you find marls everywhere. In the Corton Hill, you find marls in the Romanée Saint-Laurent, the Romanée Conti, for example. So you get some shells in it, not exactly the same as the one you find in Chablis. We call them marls with Exogyra acuminata. You see, so that's not exactly the same. The difference is 10 million of years. So that's quite a bit of difference. So good amount of time. No, just quite a bit of time. But just imagine 1 millimeter of sediment in a year. It's not very much. But in 1,000 years, it's 1 meter. In a million of years, it's 1,000 meters. So in some places in Burgundy, we reckon that the thickness of the layers can reach more than a few hundred meters. Like in Mercury, we reckon it's about 600 meters. With different strats. You have limestone, different type of limestones, marls, pebbles, clays. So that is what we call a millefeuille. You know, that's different layers of the sediments. And that is what is the solid subsoil here in Burgundy, and is on that type of solid subsoil you find, of course, the best vineyards. Okay, so limestone is the key, like you said. This period lasts about a few million of years. We call it the Jurassic. You know Jurassic, where it comes from?
Yes, we've seen the movie.
Steven Spielberg. Jurassic comes from Jura. Jura Mountains.
Really?
Yes, that's why I ask you if you knew. Because usually people Jurassic, what Jurassic, you know, dinosaurs.
Yes, it is.
But because the Jura Mountains are just 60 kilometers from here, near the border of Switzerland, and they were formed during that period, the sediments. That's why we call the period Jurassic, after the Jura Mountains.
Wow.
Oh, I did not know that.
You see?
We know nothing. It's okay.
Oh, well, don't worry, I don't know much. So here, limestone, that's a typical classic limestone from Burgundy. We call it calcaire de Comblanchien. Comblanchien limestone is the backbone of the Côte de Nuit. You know, the Côte de Nuit is really on those type of compact, hard limestone. But you may find different type of limestone, like I said, with the different level of sea during those million of years. So in each village, more or less, sometimes you have a type of limestone that can be different. That's why you see quarries when you visit. You know, you come down from Dijon down to Beaune, and you see in each village, in some places you will find a little bit of cliffs, and people used to extract the stone to build their houses. You see? For example, so that's Comblanchien. When it's polished, you have two types of Comblanchien. You have this one, which is pure white Comblanchien. Very famous stone. Actually, we export a lot. You know, like the White House in Washington, like many places. We have that type of limestone. It's just like marble when it's polished, but quite compact and hard. That's a different, it's a mouchetier, we saw with little spots on it. That's the same quarries, but a different level. Okay, limestone de Comblanchien. If you move a little bit down south, that is the Corton. The Corton, you know, Corton Grand Cru, the Beaune. That's the type of limestone you find there. You have a little bit iron oxides in it. That's why it's a little bit in color. So, like you will have in Chassagne-Montrachet as well. So you see, Sex is this one is Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit, Rocheron Doré. That's another which is quite close to the Comblanchien, but with a little different type of colors in it. So you can imagine the different period, maybe 1 or 2 million of years difference. You see? That the 7 is one other one, is Tonnerre, that's near Chablis. It's more tender. You know, the more you go to the northwest, more recent is the limestone and not as compact it is. You know? And if you go over the Jurassic period, you have the Crétacé. Crétacé is come from Cré, chalk, and that's the type of limestone you find in Champagne. You can really, you know, dig your cellar by hand. It's so soft, like the Loire Valley, the tuffeau. You heard about tuffeau? If you have,
Yes.
If you like the Chenin variety, tuffeau is a very soft type of limestone. Okay, but here in Burgundy, specifically the Côte de Nuit, is very resistant. It's very compact. It's even more compact than the Côte de Beaune, and they're very close to each other. That's why when you visit the Côte de Nuit, you see that each village is at the exit of a little valley, dry valley, we call it combe. A combe is a dry valley which is closed, not open, okay? And you have cliffs on each side, stones, and you will find the vineyard at the exit on the both sides near the valley. So you have those narrow valley in the Côte de Nuit, but if you move to the Côte de Beaune, the valley gets wider and they open. Why? Just because the limestone is not as compact, so their erosion went faster. Maybe in 10 million of years, those little combs in the Côte de Nuit will be open, because it takes a little bit of time to millimeter by millimeter to open a valley. Okay? But that's important for the wine, the style of the wine. The Côte de Nuit is on the Comblanchien, where the Côte de Beaune is Upper Jurassic, the Côte de Nuit is Middle Jurassic. And when you look at Côte de Nuit like that, in the for you, it will be like that, and the Côte de Beaune like that. The Côte de Nuit sediment goes under the colline of Courtauld and re-emerge in Chassagne-Montrachet. That's why in Chassagne-Montrachet you get the same, more or less same type of soil and subsoil that you get in Jovet-Charlatan. And if you want a great headwind from the Côte de Beaune, go for Chassagne-Montrachet.
Okay.
But people are daft, because Chassagne-Montrachet, they all want to buy the wax, which is good. Right? So limestone is the key, Jura is the key, Jurassic period. And I remember when I was in university to learn about geology a little bit, we had a professor, and he said, Burgundy is easy. We found it very difficult. He said, it's easy, you just have to remember one word. We said, what? He said, Jurassic. So this professor was called after that Mr. Jurassic. Okay, so to give you an idea, 200 million of years ago, you see deposits at the bottom of the sea with the different layers, sometimes hard, limestone, marls, clay. 65 million of years ago, you have a push from the African continent, push up to the European one, back to the East France today, and you have the creation of the Pyrenees Mountains, high pressure. So when the pressure releases, you have the central massif in the middle of France, which up a little bit, and all those horizontal layers in Chablis went down like that. It moves up that way. Little 10 million of years after, you have one other fracturation. They release the pressure, and then you have fracturation, just the movement of the plates went down, and all the valley here dropped down. That is the Saône River Valley. Here is the Jura. Here is the Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit, and the Côte Chalonnaise. Same type of sediments. The separation is just that valley, now is filled up with that here. But if you dig down, you find the same type of limestone mounds at the bottom of the valley, but under 1,000 meters. 24 million of years ago, we have another fracturation. So you will see all the steps going to the valley, and that's on the edge of those steps you will find some of the vineyards. That's it. In the Côte Chalonnaise, you have a way down here facing east and a way down here facing west, where Côte de Nuit, Côte de Beaune, all is facing east. The Mâconnais, that's a little bit different because it was closer from the Alps, so the pressure was very, very tight before the Alps came out anyway. And you have a series of fault line here, north to south, and you get on both sides of those valleys, you will get the vineyard of the Mâconnais, Mâcon village, and the Mâcon plus the name of the village. 5 million of years ago, another push from the African continent moved from Italy up to the north of Europe, and you will have the creation of the Alps mountains. And you can see the Alps when you look on a map. The shape of the Alps is like that. You come from France, Swiss, north of Italy, and Austria, and it just showed how it's been pushing like that, and like I said. Anyway, 2 million of years ago, and now we start with another era, when we had lots of frost. It was the glacier period. We have some glacier here, so you have everything frost, and it took, a few 100,000 of years with all the glaciation, the frost, defrost periods, and that's why those valleys been digging. Specifically those corn in the valley of the Côte de Beaune. Because you imagine when it freezes, it gets very cold, the limestone can split, and then you get the water flows, when it defrosts, it will move, and then it will break all those stones and the sediments in pieces. In fact, we are on a mosaic of thousands and thousands and thousands of different plots, pieces, and it's on those pieces, we call them climat today, where we go vines and we make wine. Any idea how many different wines are elaborated each year in Burgundy from two major grape varieties, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay? How many different wines we can make in Burgundy?
3,000, 1,500, 6,000, 10,000, 100,000, 50,000.
50,000.
Hey, winner.
Three- 3,500 wine estate. Okay? They all make between 10 and 15 different wines.
3,500, hold on.
3,500 wine estate.
How many wines?
They make about, each one make between 10 and 15 different wines. So if you calculate, you are over 35,000, nearly 40,000. Plus 230 wine houses, they all make at least 100 different wines, plus 16 cooperative cellars. If you add 16 cooperative,
Comparative.
so if you add all that, you reach about 50,000 wines. Okay? How many wine a professional can taste in a year?
Well, I'm gonna say like maybe 2,000, 3,000.
Well, I don't know. We've done
Let's say
400.
3,000 between 3,000 and 5,000.
You know how many we've tasted so far? How many?
This week?
Today?
This
Today?
week.
No,
this week.
This week?
This week.
This week and
100?
last week.
What? How much?
I think we're close to 250.
No,
No.
more than that.
Really?
Yesterday was 3 something.
At this point after today, we'll be over 400.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And
crazy.
And we're on day 9.
Yeah.
Day 9.
Day
In
9.
9 days, we've tasted 400 wines.
So, you know, the worst I did, it was years ago for a famous review, magazine in France for wine, called La Revue des Vins de France. We were tasting, it's years ago, the vintage 2000, I think it was 2000. So we've been all through the Côte de Nuit, Côte de Beaune. From Monday to Friday, we taste 900 wines. And on Friday, you can't feel your tongue anymore.
Yes.
You cannot make any more difference.
Yes.
So I did once, and the year after I said, no way. That's stupid, it's ridiculous. No, it is, because you taste the Montrachet, you have, like 30 seconds to taste it. You taste, it's criminal.
Don't tell her.
Don't do that.
Don't tell her.
Where is it?
Exactly.
The quickies are not good.
No, I think when we do in a different competition, when we taste, I think 51 in a day, that's not bad.
Yeah.
51 in a day, that's not bad. You're already quite tired on evening. Because you need concentration.
That's why we go get a beer at the end of the day.
And that's why. Exactly. Then you don't have to think. Get thirsty. Right. So here,
Except
you
for
will see
trying
on the
all the
map.
European beers. You gotta think about it.
Think about it. You gotta Google it.
We will we let the map going on. It's a little. You see different pictures here, like Locher. You know where's Locher? Pouilly-Locher, Pouilly-Vinzel, Pouilly-Fussé, the Mâconnais. South part of Burgundy. Fantastic area for white wine, for Chardonnay. Puligny-Montrachet, you probably heard about it. You know Puligny-Montrachet? No? You don't know the Montrachet? The
Yes.
famous Montrachet will be over there, here. That Chapelle, Haute de Peigne, that's Chablais. But here you can see limestone, marl, some more limestone, that's why you have trees. Then you get some more marls, deeper soil here. And that's, you will see all the you can see the different level, the strats. And here you have even quarries. They use to extract, that's just they use to extract the stone. And that is very important to understand the characteristic of the wine, because when you have lots of limestone, you have freshness, very precise aromas, like citrus type of aromas, and then you get the minerality, as we said, in the wine, very fine, very elegant. On clay, for example, the wine will be a bit more heavy, more structure, more tannins for the reds, but maybe not as fine and elegant. And on marl, that's interesting. On marl, you may have the structure and the finesse as well. It depends on the type of marl exactly. Some are very important for the white, some others are very nice marls for the reds. Like you have the Dimension marls for Chablis, fantastic, the Marne of Vernon for the Cordon Chardonnay. But if you go to Romanée Saint-Vivant, they have marls as well. But they're not exactly the same, they're a little bit older, but they are very good for the Pinot Noir. Right, so here you discovered that is this area has been classified at the UNESCO, but we will see on the map a little bit further. So the Côte de Beaune and the Côte de Nuit. It means the type of viticulture is what is classified. We talk about clima, the plots of land. You will see in a minute the whole area from the Mâconnais, Côte Chalonnaise, Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit, and here you will have Chablis. South is over there, north is over there. So don't remember limestone. Limestone, marls, clay, and so on. The valleys, so you get the roads, main road here. The river will be a bit further down here. Beaune, Nuit Saint-Georges, Chalon-sur-Saône, Mâcon, the Mâconnais. All that is limestone. You see limestone and marl. You can see. So limestone is very present. All those are alluvions, coming from the little rivers and coming from the top. That is all the vineyards, the little mosaic, all the different little plots of this area, right? So you get all the different wine, different appellation on those areas. Then after that, you will discover the appellation regional. But first, the different area, the Mâconnais, Cluny, Mâcon, Tournu. All that is the Mâconnais. It's the largest area in Burgundy. And then they produce mostly white wine. Here is the Côte Chalonnaise, near Chalon-sur-Saône. You have red and white wine, village and premier cru. Here you get the Côte de Beaune and the Bourgogne Côte de Beaune, red and white as well. The Côte de Nuit, mostly red, and the Haute Côte de Nuit, which is here. And of course, Chablis over there. All in green is what we call the regional AOC. So over there it will be called Mâcon, Mâcon village, and Mâcon plus the name of the village. Here we'll call just Bourgogne. And here also Bourgogne. That's regional. It's more than 50% of the production. In green, you have the name of the village where I come from. Pouilly-Fussé, Pouilly-Vinzay, Viré-Clessé. That you get Montagny, Givry, Mercurey, and the Côte de Beaune, you get Pomard, for example, Chevreson. In yellow, they are the appellation village premier cru, 10% of the production. Okay? You see, not very many in the Mâconnais, much more in the Côte de Beaune and Côte de Nuit. And the top of the hierarchy will be the Grand Cru. Look, the Grand Cru, here, and here, 1%. So those wines are a little bit more expensive, as you can guess. Very rare to find them. It was 1% of the production. Just to give you an idea, Burgundy, we produce 200 million bottles a year, which is nothing. 0.5% of the world production. So really, we are nothing. 200 million bottles a year. If the wine was drunk by the French people only, it would be only 3 bottles each. We do export 50%. So it's 1.5 bottle left each for a year. It means it's a glass per month. I'm doing much more than that, as you can guess. The Grand Cru will be 1% of that glass. Imagine when you have some Grand Cru on your table, you're quite lucky. You're quite lucky. It's just, that's why also some wines are quite expensive, we should say, because the demand is very high and the production is very low. So if you want it, you have to pay for it. But when you see that some bottles here can reach a few thousand euros a bottle, then that's a bit of money. You know, when you know that to make a bottle of wine doesn't cost more than 6, 7, or 8 euros a bottle. But you have to think, the wine is expensive because it's rare and the demand is very high. And when the wine is expensive, the land is becoming very expensive. So now, if you buy some vineyard and if you want to make a profit, you have to sell your wine very expensive, otherwise you lose money. It's something very difficult to change. You cannot decide tomorrow the Grand Cru will sell it at 20 euros, people will go bankrupt. You see? It's something, it's like a vicious circle. It's like that year after year, the prices, we always said, oh, this year it will stop. Up 5% more, depends on the weather condition, depends on the quality of the vintage and so on. But that is very complex. But of course, when you open a bottle of Grand Cru, is something exceptional on your table. You should, realize that you have something that very rare and exceptional. Okay? A little bit of history behind you.
Les convertis au christianisme s'établissent dans la région et cohabitent avec les Gallo-Romains dans la nouvelle Burgondie.
So I will start from the beginning. Anyway, I go much slower than they will catch up. Here, before the Roman invasion, 52 before Christ, we had the Celt tribes. Okay, the Celt tribe living here called the Séduins. They were all, independent, and those people did lots of business with the Roman already. They bought lots of wine also, and we find lots of amphoras, empty amphoras in the area, just to prove that they were drinking wine. Because in amphora, when you buy wine in amphora, you have to break the neck if you want to drink the wine. So you cannot use amphora anymore. So you use it for pavement, you use it for many things. But they did lots of business also with metal, with different things, with Rome. And some even did go to work in Rome at that time. It was much more, there was much more sophisticated civilization than most of the people think, And with the Roman invasion, of course, as the Celt people used to love wine, the Roman will probably, as they will control the land, the country, they will help to settle the base of the wine industry, if we can say so. So the first vineyard was planted probably around the 1st century. We discovered near Gevrey-Chambertin, in the valley, in the plain, we discovered some trace of an existing vineyards, and we dated back from the year 50 about. So from that period, year after year, we grew, we extended a little bit the vineyard, but it was really just a few hectares, and it was in the plain, not on the slope, and it was along the Roman roads, because that's where the traffic was, that's where the people used to exchange the produce, the business was, and also where the people used to stop to spend the night there, change the horse or whatever, and drink some wine, because people were drinking wine. So wine was something very important in all the Mediterranean area. So the wine became popular and more popular, and they decided to grow vines a bit more and sell wines as well. But what was very important, in the 5th century, you have a tribe coming from the little island northwest of Denmark to Germany. Then they came down Switzerland, north of Italy, crossed the Rhone River Valley, and came to settle here, and they created a kingdom. They created the kingdom of Burgondie. They were the Burgund. It was, the people coming from the north, and they traveled during about 200 years. It took them 200 years to come from their island to Germany and to settle here. And during those 200 years, they become Christian. And that is very important. Why? Because, the wine is linked to Christianity. As you know, for the Christian, the wine is the blood of Christ. So the church will become more and more important after the 3rd and the 4th century. And as the church is becoming more important, you have lots of monastery, abbey were created, and each time you have a new abbey or a new monastery, you will have a vineyard with it, because they needed to produce wine to celebrate the office, but also to welcome people in the abbey or in the monastery. Wine was something natural. People didn't drink water, they were drinking wine. And that lasted until the 1960s. I was brought up with wine, not with water. But that of wine and that of water.
Ils se donnent ainsi
And when you get older, less water.
et pour mieux faire connaître.
But it was ordinary wine because it wasn't safe, specifically in the town it was different, but in the small village it wasn't safe to drink the water out of the well. You will get disease, you will get infection or whatever. So people were drinking wine. So wine was a part of the everyday drink. It was, here we didn't drink beer, we are drinking wine. That becomes very important. So after that,
Sous vos yeux,
in
de
the
l'histoire de la Bourgogne viticole de
14th, 15th century, the Duke of Burgundy runs this country, this area, become very powerful, more powerful than the King of France actually. They fight with him, but they lost. Otherwise, the capital of France would be Dijon and not Paris. So we miss it. Anyway, in that period of time, the wine become a little bit more sophisticated, and also they select really, they make a difference between the Gamay and the Pinot Noir. The Pinot Noir was the wine for the elite, for the people, for the bourgeoisie, where the Gamay was the grape for the ordinary people, makes ordinary wine. So they made that difference already during that period. And very slowly, like in 1441, the Duke Jean Le Bon of Burgundy said you should only plant the vines in the best area and not in the very flat area where it's too, too wet or the soil is too deep. But from the valley, he moved up to the slope. 500 years later, around 500, with the Burgundy, they started to plant the vineyard on the slope. And that's today is where they make the best wine. But they didn't know that. They planted because the Burgundy, when they arrived here, they have no land, so they planted where there was nothing growing. So on the slope, it was only bushes, rocks, so they started to plant vines there. And luckily, that's where we make the best wine today.
Les Gaulois utilisent un contenant pour conserver la
So you see, it's catching up now. At the beginning, for us, then with the
facilement transportable.
4th or 5th century, the barrel appeared. They used it for the beer before, for the cervoise. And for the wine, it was a fantastic thing to use because you could transport the wine. It was not fragile, you couldn't break it, you see. And also, you can use it again. With the amphora, you use once, that's it. Then you can age the wine later on in it. But at that time, they didn't age the wine so much. So the vines was quite high at that period of time, like pergolas.
Sur la loi Gombette, les Burgondes défrichent les coteaux qu'ils
That's
plantent dans
Burgund in
et laissent la plaine,
you see, 6th century. They start to grow vines on the slope.
d'une culture laborieuse donnant un
It
raisin
was
de qualité.
quite difficult because very stony, very difficult to walk,
Monastique à venir.
and the yield was not very
Vient
important.
alors le temps des moines et des évêques.
The church became very
Côte de Beaune,
powerful
évêché de
in
Lorme,
relation to the French Revolution.
évêché de
The
Châlons,
church was the largest owner
les grands
of
ordres
vineyards
mystiques du
in the
Moyen
Middle
Âge,
Age.
les bénédictins de Beaune,
They
les
owned most
cisterciens
of
de
the
Cité et
most
d'autres,
prestigious
comme Saint-Germain
vineyards,
d'Auxerre,
with the abbey, with the
s'établissent peu à
monastery,
peu
with
sur toute la Bourgogne.
the bishops and all those
Ils
people.
bâtissent les premiers clos, clos de Bèze, clos de Gougeot. Ils façonnent le
I
paysage.
don't know if you know the clos
et
de
élaborent
Beaujon,
le modèle
for
de
example, in the
viticulture
Côte de Nuit
bourgogne.
that's been built, it's the one that's been built by
Le
the monks of
développement des
Cité.
villes au XIIe et XIIIe siècle entraîne une évolution
Very
du paysage.
early, 12th and 13th century.
Les vignes sont plantées au pied de leurs enceintes.
Then
en
after
forme de
that,
lieu de consommation.
the towns will start to grow, in
Les
the
villes
12th,
retirent
13th
également des
century.
revenus pour renforcer leur
There are
autonomie.
still lots of small villages, but the towns start to be a bit more important, and the vineyard will be around the towns. And that's around the towns, the vineyard become more famous. And that's why until nearly the 19th century, the wine were the most famous and the wine were closest to the town. Like in the Côte de Nuit, it was near
Les
Dijon.
villes comprennent que le rayonnement
Like
de la
Marsanais,
Bourgogne
Couchet,
passe par
those
l'excellence
wine
des
were more
vins
famous
producteurs.
than the wine
Et en
from Beaune or
1395,
from
Philippe
even
de
Morisani or
interdit le
Champollion
déloyal
at the
gamin
time.
sur les
It will be
terres
only
de
from the
Beaune et
17th
Châlons.
and 18th century that things will change.
Qui renforçaient leur autonomie grâce au commerce du vin.
Toujours mû par la nécessité
So
de
that's
défendre
Jean Le
la
Bon.
qualité et la notoriété
They
des
start to select the best.
Philippe Le Bon instaure
Non,
à son
Philippe Le
tour
Bon, sorry.
une hiérarchie du vinoiset.
was Philippe le Rapide.
En 1441, il interdit toute nouvelle plantation dans les chétifs. Autrement dit,
He just said that he doesn't allow
les cépages
to
deviennent peu à
people
peu une référence.
to plant vines anywhere. But he has to be really in the best area, in the best place, so they can make the best wine as
Au
possible.
16e, 17e siècle, les
And the one
centres
become
villes favorisent l'ascension
more and more
sociale des
famous.
marchands.
You know, they were the best wine probably at the table of the King of France at that period of time. And with the Duke of Burgundy, it started to export to the north of Europe because the Belgium, part of Belgium was part of Burgundy. And just before the revolution, the Pinot Noir started to be famous, and it was the wine of the aristocracy, you know, the nobles, the wealthy people. And that's where the Crema starts to really be very important, like the Montrachet, like the Chambertin, like all those great wine coming from a specific place. They become very famous the 18th century, 17th, 18th century, up to 19th century. They were more famous than the name of the village. Example, I give you an example. 200 years ago,
Après la
about
Révolution,
300
tout
years
semble
ago,
réussir aux
the
maisons
name
de
of the
commerce.
village here
Les vins
was
sont
not
qualité,
just
d'excellente
two words
réputation.
together, it was just one
Le
word.
commerce
Puligny
libéral.
Montrachet wasn't Puligny
Les
Montrachet,
nouveaux
it was
transports
Puligny.
favorisent les exportations,
Gevrey
les
Chambertin,
commandes
it was Gevrey. Moret,
Mais un insecte
Nuit,
ravageur,
Chassagne,
le
Fernand.
phylloxéra, bouleverse
second
alors le
name
cours de l'histoire.
was not
En
part
France,
of the-
il
was a
décrit
part of
toutes les
the
vignes
name of the
entre
village.
1875
But
et
in the beginning of the
1880.
19th century, one wine became very famous, it was the Chambertin. You heard about Chambertin, Grand Cru, rouge, red and Grand Cru from Gevrey Chambertin, fantastic wine. It was the favorite wine of Napoleon I.
En sélectionnant les meilleures parcelles,
And so everybody in Paris wanted to buy some Chambertin because the emperor was drinking Chambertin. So you can imagine, they were drinkers
La loi de
already.
1884
So what's happened when the people wanted to buy some Chambertin?
Ils se
They
donnent
went
ainsi les moyens de lutter
to
contre les
visit the
pratiques
vineyard,
frauduleuses
the
et
wine
de
growers
faire
in
renaître les
Gevrey,
vignobles
and
privés.
asked them to buy some Chambertin. So they said, no,
les
sorry, we
appellations
have just
d'origine
a little
contrôlée
vineyard. It's
formalisent la
not enough
hiérarchie des
for the
appellations
whole city of
et leur
Paris.
donnent les moyens
We
d'encadrer
can
les
sell you
méthodes
the
de
one from
production.
Gevrey, which is next to it.
Les vins de Bourgogne
Next plot.
ont un cahier des charges.
But
à
it's not
respecter.
Chambertin.
Les AOC
People
officialisent
said, no,
les
we want
conditions
some
de production,
Chambertin.
confortent la
You see
viticulture de terroir
how difficult
et
it was.
l'histoire
So
du climat.
those people of Gevrey had a fantastic idea. They said, okay,
Sous vos yeux,
he has the authorization
2000
with
d'histoire de la
Philippe, the King of
Bourgogne
France, to
viticole.
change the name of the village. So to the name of Gevrey, they had Chambertin. Because Chambertin was in Gevrey. So Gevrey became Gevrey Chambertin in 1847. And it was a great success. Because people
Les
thought it was
vignerons,
some
les
Chambertin
domaines
probably
et
in
les
the
maisons
Gevrey.
de vin d'aujourd'hui en sont les héritiers
So
et
it
les
was
acteurs.
so brilliant idea that Moret became Moret Saint-Denis, Chassagne, Chassagne Montrachet, Puligny, Puligny Montrachet, because the second name was more well known than the village itself. So from that period of time, the village started to be a bit more well known, but that's only in the 19th century. You see, that's quite recent, in fact. End of the 19th century, the phylloxera destroyed all the vineyards in France, in Burgundy, and in many countries in the world. So we had to find a solution, you know, to avoid that. And the solution was to graft European species on American rootstock. Because the phylloxera came from America, and on American varieties, it didn't, damage those plants because the protection of the roots is thicker than those on the European variety. So the bug cannot get through the heart of the root. So that's today all the
Nous
vineyards
sommes au
graft on
1er siècle
American rootstock.
après Jésus-Christ.
And now in America,
Ici,
all the
comme dans toute la
graft on American rootstock because they borrow the European variety.
Ils construisent des routes et des villes,
Okay.
imposent leur administration
Let's carry on.
et apportent un élément symbolique de la romanité.
Let's have a look at those type of soil you find here. So don't forget that most of the vineyard will be located on the edge of the plateau, facing east on the slope. So on the top of the slope, you have the soil is very, very shallow, you know, maybe 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters. That would be about or 40 centimeters would be the maximum. Usually it's more like 20 centimeters. But at the bottom of the slope, it can be 1 meter, or sometimes 1 meter 20. Then underneath, you always have limestone anyway. So that's an example in Beaune Romane. You see it here is about 50 centimeters, at least, of soil. And underneath you get the limestone of Comblanchien. But in split in pieces. So the roof system can go through those splits. You have 80% of the roof system will stay on that level, and then you have about 2 major roots will go through the limestone, in the split of the limestone, to get the humidity, the water, when it's water, or to get to just feed the plant. Because here is one thing you have to know: we don't irrigate. It's not allowed. If you see someone irrigate in trouble. First, it's almost impossible because we are on a slope, but also because we don't have enough water reserve. Okay? And when you irrigate a plant, what's happened? The roof system stays on the surface because the water comes from the top. Why should I go down when it's easy to just wait for the water? So you don't get any complexity really. You don't get the complexity coming from those limestone. So that's why we don't irrigate. And it's one other thing as well, can explain that too. We, if you saw the vineyard here, it's high density vineyard. It means we have one plant every meter, very close to each other. Why we do that is to create a competition between the plant, so the roof system, they are concurrent, so they go deep down instead to stay on the surface. Okay? So that's why you find those high density plantation. It makes a little bit of difference. Right? Here you see that's the soil here is not as brown because here you have maybe a little bit of iron oxide, here much less. But here is what we call a marl. You see the marl is a mix between limestone and the clay. So you can break it, but it's a stone, but you can break it quite easily. And that is what you find in Beaune, north of the Côte Chalonnaise. And that type of soil is very suitable for Chardonnay, or here is Aligoté, the white clay varieties. Right? But each village, each plot will have a different type of composition. And sometimes inside the same plot, from the top, the middle, of the bottom part of the plot, you may have some difference as well. So if we want to play with that, we can make more than 50,000 different wines. We can make maybe 200, 500,000 different wines. Because sometimes it's only a few square meters. And you have certain type of soil, you move a little bit, less clay, less pebbles, more pebbles. You know, so that's very, very complex, really. But that's fascinating. Okay? Let's see here what we call a comb. See, I've been talking about those dry valleys in the Côte de Nuit. That's a dry valley, right? And this, you see, it's not open. Here, it's, you have to go to the top. So it's quite interesting for the biodiversity. So the plateau, you can see the plateau here. That's compact limestone, so you won't see very much here. A little bit of, sometimes people will plant some weeds or things like that. The weeds, different type of plants, but it doesn't need deep soil because the roof system can go very deep. But you have no vineyard here. The vineyard you will find some in the valley here on the west because you have some valleys and on both sides of the valley. Or here we are on the edge of the Vallée de la Saône, you know, the valley which dropped millions of years ago. And the vineyard will be located here under the limestone. Here you will have the forest, usually. And here you get some marls, a bit of more limestone, tiny bit of clay sometimes. It's just like, you can see here, the different layers. You see? You have that's conglomerate, what we call conglomerate. That's what happened during the Quaternary era, when with the frost and the defrost, it works all the little pebbles and mixed with the clay as well. And that's quite good for the red wines. So the best exposition is the one facing east. You get the first sunshine in the morning. That's very important. because the vines doesn't like water. Doesn't like water too much. Doesn't have the feet in the water. So when you get the first sunshine in the morning, the soil gets dry very quickly. It's much better to be facing east than to be facing west. Facing west is very hot in the afternoon, but also the sun arrives a little bit later. And facing west is facing the wind who bring the rain. When you face east, you protected by the forest here from the rain. So that's very important. Another thing as well, here you may find some vineyard, in some places here, but you won't find here. This one is not the best example we saw on a map, because that is facing north, that's cold and that's hot. And we will see in Pommard, for example, what is facing south will be classified Pommard Premier Cru, what is facing north is just classified Pommard. Same soil, but just because of both sides of the valley. I'll show you on the map there. Okay? If you have any questions, go to Cité. You can ask. I don't know if
What does the O mean on the compass star? You have north, south, east. I know it's supposed to be
O is west.
I know, but what does the O stand for?
O, west. We write in French O-U-E-S-T.
Okay.
We pronounce west.
Okay, yes.
It's more or less the same pronunciation, but it's
Okay.
not the same writing.
How do you say it?
West.
You say west, but with an O?
O-U.
Okay.
O-U is U.
Ooh, yeah, it's like copy.
O-U
Okay.
is U, but with E is west.
Gosh, okay, I got it now. I was like, why is there an O? I know
You
it's
keep
supposed
saying
to be
west, and you're like, yeah, no, how do you say it though? West. Yeah, I get that, it's west.
I understand the Texas rose, but I couldn't understand the O.
So here you find an interactive map, and that is the map of the Côte de Beaune and the Côte de Nuit, because this area has been classified at the UNESCO 10 years ago. You see, I was talking about Pommard. So if we look Pommard, for example, here is Pommard. Okay, so the vineyard of Pommard, you have the main road here. On this side, you have the regional AOC. So here you can produce red and white wine, but you can not call it Pommard. You will call it Bourgogne. Okay, it's regional. To be called village, you have to be a little bit more near the slope, with more limestone and pebble. So you will have the Pommard village here and the Pommard Premier Cru. Come on.
Wow. That is the coolest map ever.
Oops.
Oh my gosh.
You see the village, the regional AOC. In green, you have the village level. All that is called Pommard. So you can, if 100% of the grape come from, for example, this plot, you can call it Pommard La Croix Blanche. Okay? Now, if your vineyard is here, the other side of the road, you call it Pommard Les Grands Épeneaux, but this one is classified Premier Cru because it's higher up in the soil. You have more limestone. The wine is much more complex. Okay, and you see, I was talking here. You see the valley. All those here are Premier Cru, and when you look the other side, because it's facing south, more or less, south-southeast. Here it's facing northeast. It is much colder, so that's classified just Pommard. So the orientation is very important. Except that now with the global warming, when you have a very warm summer, it could be interesting to have a vineyard here because it doesn't get as hot. You see, the maturity will be a little bit slower, and the night will be a little bit cooler, which is absolutely necessary if you want to make a great vintage. You need a warm day, a cool night. You know that in California, when you go near north of San Francisco, in those valleys, when you have cool nights, usually the maturity is the style of the wine is very different. When you come from the south part of San Francisco, you have more alcohol, for example.
Could some of the villages become Premier Cru?
That's a good question. Example. You see this one here? This vineyard is called Château de Pommard, right? When you look, the color is green. It means it's a village appellation. And I know that one of the former owner, not the one today, but the one before, he wanted to make a Grand Cru because it was Château de Pommard. He said, well, it's prestigious, it should be, And it's funny because when he arrived in Beaune, I remember I met him a few times. He said, I want to make of this chateau la Romane Conti from the Côte de Beaune. Well, people here, they laugh a little bit, you know. He said, this guy doesn't know much about it. So he was convinced. So he asked the INAO, Institut National des Appellations d'Origine, you know, what he should do to be classified Grand Cru. So the INAO said, well, here it will be quite difficult because you are at the bottom of the slope on the flat area. The first thing you have to do is you have to provide a geological study. So you need some geologists to go to analyze the soil, you know, make a carottage as we said, see where is the limestone and everything. So obviously it was not on the right soil. So you can do whatever you want, you can give as much money you want, doesn't help anything. You need to be on the right type of soil. And that will never be Grand Cru. Okay? It's not even Premier Cru. The Premier Cru is the other side of the road. But because it's a different type of soil. And when you taste it, those wines are good. I don't say that the ones are not good. they don't have that complexity, that texture, that, you know, you can make a very good wine, good techniques and everything, but you don't have that little plus, you know. Those which are very famous are Les Épinaux and Les Rugiens. Those asked recently to be classified Grand Cru. That's the problem is not solved yet, because INAO said for the Épinaux, maybe this one could be classified Grand Cru, but obviously the others on the other side, on the geological point of view, is difficult. But that's a problem because that is owned by just one estate, but the others are split between different estates. So imagine if they classify that one, people won't be very happy. Here it's a bit different, Les Rugiens. But Les Rugiens, in fact, you have two parts. You have Les Rugiens Haut, is here, and Les Rugiens Bas. And that one is classified village. So to be classified Grand Cru, you know, they said maybe the part of that Rugien, we have to see if we can upgrade it. But the growers, they're not happy. They want to have both Rugien classified. So for the moment, it's been more than 20 years they've been working on it. And it's not sure that they will succeed. You cannot change like that. It takes a long, long time to change, and you need, one, to provide a geological study, two, to provide a historical study to show that during those 2 or 3 last century, the wine were quite famous already, then an economical study, then to finish historical, historical study too, and then to finish an organoleptic. Each grower have to give some sample during a certain time, vintages, you know, for a long period of time, to see if the wine reached the quality you asked for. So all together it takes about 20 years. If you succeed. Like the last one, the Premier Cru, some of the last one were Pouilly-Fuissé, been classified Premier Cru, some of the plots. But why? In fact, when we created the appellation, the AOC in Burgundy, they date back from 1936, the first one was created in 1937, we had 3 levels: regional, village, Grand Cru. Quite easy, huh? The region, the village, and the Grand Cru is the single vineyard, right? No Premier Cru at that time. The Premier Cru appeared a few years later, 1939, Second World War. So the north of Burgundy was controlled by Germany. We were under the control of Germany, and the Germans started to confiscate some wine. Okay? They confiscate usually Vin de Table, ordinary wine, and regional AOC. But they didn't confiscate the village. But unluckily, 40 and 41, 2 bad vintages, so they started to confiscate the village. So you can imagine all the growers here, with the officials, it was a big panic. So very quickly they decide for the best clima of the village to have a specific classification, village Premier Cru. So Premier Cru is a part of the village level, but the best part. Right? So you see, that's is something And that's in Pouilly-Fuissé. They were not under the control of Germany. It stopped in Montagny, the Claude Chardonnay, so they didn't need to be classified to escape the confiscation. So that's why they only had their public in 2020. Because they realized that they will sell it at a better price if they classify it. So in some villages you have no Premier Cru, but you have fantastic wine. Like some villages don't have any Grand Cru. Pomard is the case, Beaune is the case, Beaune, Meursault. Sometimes it's because they didn't ask for it. Sometimes, like Pomard, it was the war between the négociant, the wine merchant, and the wine growers. The wine merchant didn't want to see some Grand Cru in Pomard because they will have to buy the wine more expensive. In Nuit Saint-Georges, it's because the people didn't ask for it because the guy in charge of the interest of the wine grower owned some of the best vineyards, and he didn't want that his friend said, you classify your vineyard but not ours. You see, sometimes you have just human story. And it's not because, I mean, if you want a great wine, you know, get a Nuit Saint-Georges Premier Cru, les Beaucrins, les Cailles, with half price and a Grand Cru the next village. And this is good. That's the Grand Cru that they do. Les Meursault Premier Cru is the same. You have some Meursault in Clos La Perrière, they are the same level and the Bâtard Branché. But they're not Grand Cru. You see? So there's lots of things to think about it. C'est l'heure? Ok. Donc, je finis juste là. 2 secondes. De quoi?
On va faire le belvédère.
Okay. Okay. So sorry. I think just I'm here. It's just a difference. Few education about the grape varieties. Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, 91%. What you have to know that Chardonnay is the son of Pinot Noir. Is the result of a crossing between Gouais Blanc and Pinot Noir, and Chardonnay as brother or sister, whatever, Gamay and Aligoté. Gamay, Chardonnay, Aligoté, they all have the same dad, Pinot Noir. That's why we said Pinot Noir is the chef of a large family. Okay, sorry about that.
We have very few minutes if you want to go all the way up to the rooftop. So if you want to see it, just come along. And those who are not interested, maybe you can stay a bit longer with your class. Okay? So